In the vast wilderness of Nevada's high desert, where wild Mustang herds have roamed freely for generations, ranch owner Catherine Morrison believed she had witnessed every possible display of animal behavior. During her 40 years of working with horses, nothing could have prepared her for the sight that greeted her on that crisp autumn morning when a lone Mustang stallion appeared on the horizon, traveling with obvious purpose across the rugged landscape toward her ranch. What made this sighting extraordinary wasn't just the stallion's determination to cover 40 miles of treacherous terrain, or even his willingness to approach human habitation despite the deep mistrust wild Mustangs harbor toward people. It was what he was carrying so carefully on his back that would challenge everything Catherine believed about animal compassion, sacrifice, and the profound depths of parental love that exist in the wild. This magnificent stallion's cargo would not only melt the hearts of everyone who witnessed it, but would also redefine our understanding of what family means in the animal kingdom. Catherine Morrison stood at her kitchen window, her morning coffee growing cold as she stared across the rolling high desert landscape that stretched endlessly toward the distant mountains. At 63 years old, Catherine had spent most of her life on the Sunrise Ranch, a 2,000-acre property that served as both a working cattle ranch and a sanctuary for rescued horses. Her weathered hands and sun-lined face told the story of decades spent caring for animals that others had given up on. The first hint that something unusual was happening came from her border collie, Max, whose sharp barking drew Catherine's attention to the eastern ridgeline. Through the morning haze, she could make out the silhouette of a lone horse moving steadily across the desert floor. But this wasn't one of her ranch horses. The animal's gait and bearing marked him unmistakably as a wild Mustang. Catherine reached for her binoculars, a habit developed through years of monitoring the various wildlife that crossed her property. What she saw through the lenses made her catch her breath. The approaching horse was a magnificent stallion, his coat of deep chocolate brown with a flowing black mane that caught the desert wind. But it wasn't his beauty that captured Catherine's attention. It was the obvious care with which he was moving, as if carrying something precious. "That's not possible," Catherine murmured to herself, adjusting the focus on her binoculars for a clearer view. Wild Mustangs avoided human settlements, especially stallions, who understood the threat that capture and removal posed to their freedom. Yet this horse was deliberately approaching her ranch, his movement purposeful rather than accidental. As the stallion drew closer, Catherine could see the strain in his posture and the determination in his steady approach. His coat was dusty, and his breathing was labored, suggesting he had traveled a considerable distance. More puzzling still was the way he moved, careful, measured steps that spoke of something more than simple exhaustion. Catherine grabbed her jacket and headed outside, her curiosity overriding her usual caution around wild horses. She had developed a reputation throughout Nevada as someone who could handle difficult horses, earning the trust of animals that others considered impossible. But approaching a wild stallion required skills and patience that even she found challenging. As she made her way toward the fence line, Catherine began to make out more details of the approaching horse. The stallion was larger than most Mustangs she had encountered, probably standing close to 16 hands, with the muscular build of a horse who had spent his life surviving in harsh conditions. His dark brown coat was marked with scars that spoke of battles fought and won, and his intelligent eyes showed the weariness of an animal who had learned to distrust humans. But there was something else in those eyes, something that looked remarkably like hope or perhaps desperation. The stallion's approach wasn't random. He was coming to her ranch with specific intent, as if he knew exactly where he was going and why. When the stallion finally reached the boundary fence of her property, Catherine gasped at what she could now clearly see. Riding on the stallion's broad back, secured by the horse's own carefully positioned legs and supported by his gentle movements, was a small foal that couldn't have been more than a few days old. The baby horse was clearly not the stallion's own offspring. While the stallion was a deep brown Mustang with the sturdy build of a wild horse, the foal was a delicate paint horse with distinctive white and brown markings that marked him as a domestic breed. Even more concerning, the foal appeared to be injured or ill, lying limply across the stallion's back with an obvious trust that spoke of hours or perhaps days of careful transport. Catherine's heart began racing as she realized what she was witnessing. A wild Mustang stallion had somehow found an orphaned or abandoned domestic foal and had carried him 40 miles across the desert to bring him to safety. The stallion stood perfectly still at Catherine's fence line, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that seemed to communicate both urgency and trust. Catherine approached slowly, her decades of experience with horses guiding every movement as she assessed the remarkable situation unfolding before her. "Easy, big guy." Catherine spoke softly, her voice carrying the calm authority that had earned the respect of countless horses throughout her career. "I can see you've brought me something special." The foal on the stallion's back was barely moving, his small chest rising and falling with a shallow breathing that indicated severe weakness. Catherine's trained eye immediately recognized the signs of dehydration and starvation in the young horse, whose paint markings were dulled by exhaustion, and whose tiny body seemed almost weightless against the stallion's powerful frame. What amazed Catherine most was the stallion's behavior. Despite being a wild horse with every instinctual reason to fear humans, he remained calm and cooperative as she opened the gate and approached. His body language clearly communicated that he understood she was there to help, not to harm. "Where did you find him, boy?" Catherine asked gently, reaching out to stroke the stallion's neck. To her amazement, the wild horse not only tolerated her touch, but seemed to lean into it, as if seeking reassurance that he had made the right decision in bringing the foal to her. The foal stirred slightly at the sound of Catherine's voice, lifting his head just enough to reveal eyes that were dulled with exhaustion, but still held a spark of life. The baby horse was a beautiful paint with white and brown markings that suggested he came from quality breeding stock. His condition indicated he had been separated from his mother for several days, possibly the victim of abandonment or a tragedy that had left him orphaned in the vast desert. Catherine's mind raced through the logistics of the rescue that had brought these two horses together. The nearest domestic horse operations were at least 40 miles away, which meant the stallion had somehow discovered the orphaned foal and made the decision to carry him across treacherous desert terrain to reach help. "You walked 40 miles carrying him, didn't you?" Catherine marveled, studying the stallion's dusty coat and the careful way he continued to support the foal with his own body positioning. "You knew exactly where to bring him." The stallion's response was a soft nickering that seemed to confirm Catherine's assessment. He had indeed traveled an enormous distance, navigating by instincts and intelligence that had guided him to the one place in the region where he might find help for his precious cargo. As Catherine prepared to lift the foal from the stallion's back, she was struck by the trust the wild horse placed in her. Most Mustangs would have bolted at the first human contact, but this stallion seemed to understand that their partnership was necessary for the foal's survival. The transfer of the foal required delicate coordination between Catherine and the stallion. As she gently lifted the weak baby horse, the stallion adjusted his position to make the process easier, demonstrating a level of cooperation that challenged everything Catherine knew about wild horse behavior. "I've got him now," Catherine assured the stallion as she cradled the foal in her arms. "You did good, boy. You saved his life." The stallion's relief was visible as he watched Catherine carry the foal toward the ranch buildings where emergency medical care waited. But rather than departing immediately, the wild horse followed at a respectful distance, clearly unwilling to abandon his rescued charge until he was certain the foal would receive proper care. Catherine realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, a wild Mustang who had appointed himself as a guardian and protector of an orphaned domestic foal, demonstrating compassion that transcended species, breeding, and the fundamental divide between wild and domestic animals. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the region's most experienced large animal veterinarian, arrived at Sunrise Ranch within an hour of Catherine's emergency call. As a professional who had treated thousands of horses throughout her 25-year career, Dr. Walsh thought she had seen every possible scenario involving equine emergencies. But nothing had prepared her for the story Catherine told or the evidence she witnessed firsthand. A wild stallion carried this foal 40 miles across the desert. Dr. Walsh asked, her skepticism evident as she began her examination of the tiny paint horse. "Catherine, that's impossible. Wild horses don't rescue domestic foals." But as Dr. Walsh worked, checking the foal's vital signs and assessing his condition, the evidence of the stallion's extraordinary journey became undeniable. The baby horse showed signs of having been carefully supported and protected during a long, difficult journey. His injuries were consistent with abandonment and exposure, but they lacked the trauma that would be expected if he had been carried carelessly or handled roughly. "Look at these pressure marks," Dr. Walsh observed, pointing to subtle indentations on the foal's sides. "These are from being supported by another horse's legs during transport. And see how his coat is worn here? That's from lying against another horse's back for extended periods." Even more compelling was the foal's emotional state. Despite his physical weakness, the baby horse showed no signs of psychological trauma or fear that would be expected from a traumatic separation or abandonment. Instead, he displayed the calm trust of an animal who had been cared for and protected throughout his ordeal. Outside the barn, the wild stallion had positioned himself where he could observe the medical treatment through the open doors. Catherine was amazed by his behavior. Rather than departing now that his mission was complete, the Mustang seemed determined to ensure the foal received proper care. "He's not leaving," Catherine observed, watching the stallion through the barn window. "It's like he's supervising the treatment." Dr. Walsh's examination revealed that the foal was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but otherwise healthy. His condition suggested he had been separated from his mother for approximately 3 to 4 days, exactly the time frame that would match a 40-mile journey across desert terrain at the careful pace the stallion would have needed to maintain to keep his cargo safe. "This foal should be dead," Dr. Walsh admitted as she administered fluids and nutrients. Without his mother's milk and protection, a newborn wouldn't survive more than a day or two in the desert heat. Something kept him alive during that journey. The answer became clear as they observed the stallion's continued behavior. The wild horse had positioned himself as a surrogate protector, using his own body heat to keep the foal warm during cold desert nights and seeking out water sources to keep both himself and his charge hydrated. The evidence of this care was written in the foal's survival and the stallion's obvious exhaustion. As the day progressed and the foal's condition stabilized, Dr. Walsh documented what she was witnessing with growing amazement. The stallion's protective instincts extended beyond simple transport. He had somehow provided the essential care that had kept the foal alive during their journey. "I need to understand how this happened," Dr. Walsh told Catherine as they watched the foal take his first tentative steps since the rescue. "This behavior challenges everything we know about wild horse psychology and social structure." The mystery deepened when Catherine discovered evidence that suggested the stallion had been making regular visits to the area around her ranch for several weeks, as if scouting potential resources for exactly this type of emergency. The wild horse hadn't simply stumbled upon the orphan foal. He had deliberately sought out help when he found an animal in need. As evening approached and the foal showed signs of recovery, the question became, what would happen next? Would the stallion finally depart, his mission complete? Or had this rescue created a bond that would challenge conventional understanding of the relationship between wild and domestic horses? As the foal's strength returned under Dr. Walsh's expert care, an even more extraordinary story began to emerge. Through careful observation and investigation, Catherine and Dr. Walsh pieced together the events that had led to this unprecedented rescue, revealing a level of intelligence and compassion in the wild stallion that challenged scientific understanding of animal behavior. The breakthrough came when Catherine recognized the stallion from previous sightings around her property. She had first noticed the magnificent brown Mustang nearly 2 months earlier, always observing her ranch from a distant ridge, but never approaching. At the time, she had assumed he was simply curious about her domestic horses or possibly scouting for water sources during the dry season. "He's been watching us," Catherine realized, reviewing photographs she had taken of the stallion during his previous visits. "He knew exactly where to bring the foal because he had been studying our operation for weeks." Dr. Walsh's investigation into the foal's origins provided the missing pieces of the puzzle. The baby horse, whom they had named Lucky for his miraculous survival, was indeed from a ranch operation approximately 40 miles to the east. A severe storm 3 days earlier had scattered a small herd of paint horses, and Lucky's mother had been found dead from a lightning strike, leaving her newborn foal alone and vulnerable in the desert. "The timing is perfect," Dr. Walsh explained, cross-referencing weather reports with the stallion's journey. The storm hit Tuesday night. The mare was found Wednesday morning, and Lucky arrived here on Friday. That's exactly the time frame for a careful 40-mile journey. The most remarkable aspect of the rescue was the stallion's decision-making process. Rather than simply finding the orphaned foal and moving on, as would be typical for wild horses, the stallion had assessed the situation and formulated a complex rescue plan that required knowledge of human operations and trust in human compassion. He had to understand that humans could provide the care Lucky needed, Catherine observed, watching the stallion continue his protective vigil outside the barn, and he had to trust that we would help rather than harm. The stallion's behavior during Lucky's recovery period revealed the depth of his emotional investment in the rescue. He established a routine of morning and evening visits to check on the foal's progress, always maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly monitoring Lucky's condition with parental concern. Dr. Walsh documented interactions between the stallion and Lucky that defied conventional animal behavior. When Lucky was strong enough to venture outside the barn, the stallion would communicate with gentle nickering sounds that the foal clearly understood and responded to. Their bond had deepened during their desert journey into something that resembled a parent-child relationship. Lucky responds to him like he would to his own father, Dr. Walsh noted, observing the foal's eager attention to the stallion's vocalizations. The stallion is exhibiting protective behaviors typically reserved for a horse's own offspring. The most touching moments came during feeding time. While Lucky now received proper nutrition from bottle feeding and eventual supplemental feeding, the stallion would position himself where he could observe every meal, his body language relaxing only when he confirmed that Lucky was eating and gaining strength. Catherine faced a decision that would have long-term implications for both horses. Lucky was clearly a domestic foal who would need human care and training to survive. But his bond with his wild rescuer had created a relationship that seemed too precious to break. Meanwhile, the stallion showed no signs of returning to his wild herd, having apparently decided that his responsibility to Lucky superseded his own needs for freedom and wild companionship. "We're witnessing the creation of an entirely new type of family," Dr. Walsh observed. "A wild horse who has chosen to be a father to a domestic foal, creating a bond that challenges everything we thought we knew about horse social structures." The question now was whether this impossible family could be preserved while ensuring both horses' long-term welfare and happiness. 6 months after the dramatic rescue, the bond between the wild stallion and Lucky had evolved into something that amazed everyone who witnessed it. Catherine had made the decision to provide permanent sanctuary for both horses, creating a unique living situation that accommodated the stallion's wild nature, while ensuring Lucky received the care and training he needed as a domestic horse. The stallion, whom Catherine had named Guardian for his protective role, had established his own routine around the ranch that respected both his wild instincts and his commitment to Lucky. During the day, he ranged freely across Catherine's extensive property, maintaining his physical fitness and natural behaviors. But every evening he would return to the paddock area where Lucky spent his nights, taking up a protective position that ensured no predators could threaten his adopted son. Lucky, now a healthy and energetic 6-month-old colt, had thrived under this unusual arrangement. His development combined the best aspects of domestic horse training with the natural wisdom Guardian shared through their daily interactions. Catherine had never seen a young horse display such confidence and intelligence, attributes she credited to Guardian's ongoing influence. "Guardian has taught Lucky things I could never teach him," Catherine explained to the wildlife biologist who had come to study their relationship. "Natural awareness, predator recognition, survival instinct, skills that domestic horses often lack because they've been bred away from wild environments." Dr. Sarah Martinez, the biologist studying Guardian and Lucky's relationship, was documenting behaviors that were unprecedented in equine research. Guardian's teaching methods with Lucky demonstrated sophisticated understanding of education and development that challenged assumptions about animal intelligence. Guardian adjusts his teaching based on Lucky's developmental stage, Dr. Martinez observed. He started with basic safety lessons when Lucky was very young, then progressed to more complex skills as the foal matured. This suggests planning and abstract thinking that we rarely see in wild animals. The most remarkable aspect of their relationship was Guardian's adaptation to ranch life while maintaining his wild identity. He had learned to tolerate necessary human interactions, veterinary care, feeding supplementation during harsh weather, and basic safety management, but only when these activities related to Lucky's welfare. He trusts me with Lucky, but he's still completely wild, Catherine noted. I can handle Lucky for training and care, but Guardian makes it clear that he's supervising every interaction. If he doesn't approve of something, he intervenes. This intervention had occurred several times during Lucky's training, with Guardian stepping in when he perceived that human activities were causing his adopted son stress or discomfort. His judgment had proven remarkably accurate, often identifying potential problems before Catherine or her trainers recognized them. The community impact of Guardian and Lucky's story had been profound. Visitors from across the country came to observe their relationship, and their story had inspired changes in wild horse management policies that recognized the emotional and social complexity of Mustang behavior. They've shown us that wild horses are capable of compassion and sacrifice that rivals human behavior, Dr. Martinez documented in her research. Guardian's decision to rescue Lucky wasn't just instinctual. It was a conscious choice that required planning, risk assessment, and trust in human nature. Lucky's training progressed under Catherine's guidance, but with Guardian's constant supervision. The young paint horse was developing into an exceptional animal whose combination of domestic training and wild wisdom made him unique in the horse world. As Lucky grew stronger and more independent, the question that worried Catherine was whether Guardian would eventually feel his parental duties were complete and return to the wild. But the stallion's behavior suggested that his commitment to Lucky was permanent, a bond forged not by genetics, but by choice and deepened by months of shared experience. Some families are born, and some are made, Catherine reflected, watching Guardian and Lucky graze together in the evening light. These two prove that love doesn't require blood relationships. Sometimes the strongest bonds are formed when one soul decides to save another. 2 years after Guardian's 40-mile rescue mission, the relationship between the wild stallion and Lucky had become legendary throughout the American West, inspiring a new understanding of animal consciousness and the lengths to which creatures will go to protect those they love. The story had attracted researchers, filmmakers, and animal lovers from around the world, all seeking to understand how a bond formed in desperation had evolved into one of the most remarkable family relationships ever documented. Lucky, now a magnificent 2-year-old paint horse, stood nearly 15 hands high and displayed the perfect combination of domestic training and wild wisdom that made him extraordinary among horses. His relationship with Guardian had deepened into something that resembled the bond between a human father and son, built on respect, love, and shared experience rather than simple genetics. Guardian, still wild and magnificent at what Catherine estimated to be 12 years old, had never shown any inclination to return to his Mustang herd. His commitment to Lucky appeared absolute, and his role had evolved from rescuer to teacher to lifelong protector. The stallion's intelligence and emotional depth continued to amaze everyone who observed their daily interactions. Guardian has redefined what we understand about animal parenting, Dr. Martinez concluded in her published research study. His relationship with Lucky demonstrates conscious choice, long-term planning, and emotional bonds that challenge our assumptions about animal consciousness. The most remarkable development had been Guardian's expansion of his protective instincts beyond Lucky. When other rescue horses arrived at Catherine's ranch, Guardian would evaluate each new arrival and often assume a mentoring role for animals showing signs of trauma or abandonment. His ability to recognize and respond to emotional distress in other horses had turned him into an unofficial therapy animal. He seems to remember what it feels like to be lost and in need, Catherine observed, watching Guardian comfort a newly arrived rescue mare who had been severely neglected. His experience with Lucky taught him that every animal deserves a chance at love and safety. Lucky's own development had been profoundly influenced by Guardian's example. The young paint horse displayed unusual empathy for other animals and had begun helping Catherine with the socialization of new rescues. His combination of domestic training and Guardian's wild wisdom made him an ideal ambassador between the human and horse worlds. The ranch had evolved into something unprecedented, a sanctuary where the partnership between Guardian and Lucky had created a new model for animal rehabilitation. Horses who had been considered impossible to rehabilitate often responded to Guardian's patient guidance and Lucky's gentle companionship in ways that traditional methods couldn't achieve. They've created their own language of healing, Catherine reflected, watching Guardian and Lucky work together to help a traumatized gelding learn to trust again. What started as one rescue has become a system for helping others. The bond between Guardian and Lucky had also inspired changes in wild horse management policies throughout the West. Their story had proven that Mustangs possessed emotional intelligence and a capacity for compassion that deserved recognition and protection. Guardian's choice to rescue Lucky had become a symbol for the importance of preserving wild horse families and territories. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, Catherine watched Guardian and Lucky graze together in the pasture, their silhouettes creating a perfect picture of the family they had chosen to become. Guardian's journey of 40 miles carrying a dying foal had not only saved Lucky's life, it had opened hearts and minds to the profound depths of love that exist throughout the animal kingdom. The wild stallion who had risked everything to save a stranger's baby had proven that the most powerful force in nature isn't survival of the fittest. It's the willingness to sacrifice everything to ensure that love survives. Their story continued to inspire everyone who heard it, reminding the world that sometimes the greatest families are the ones we choose to create through acts of pure compassion. What began as an impossible sight, a wild Mustang stallion carrying an orphan foal 40 miles across the desert, became a story that redefined our understanding of animal compassion, intelligence, and the profound depths of love that transcend species and circumstance. Guardian's shocking decision to rescue Lucky and carry him to safety wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a conscious choice that required planning, sacrifice, and trust that challenged everything we thought we knew about wild horse behavior. Today, Guardian and Lucky continue to thrive at Sunrise Ranch, where their bond has created a new model for animal rehabilitation and inspired countless people to reconsider their assumptions about what animals are capable of feeling and choosing. Their relationship proves that family isn't defined by genetics or species, but by the willingness to risk everything for someone who needs protection. Guardian's remarkable 40-mile journey, carrying Lucky to safety, demonstrates that the most powerful instinct in nature isn't survival. It's the drive to ensure that love and compassion survive even in the harshest circumstances. His choice to trust humans with Lucky's care, despite being a wild horse with every reason to fear human contact, shows the extraordinary lengths to which love will go to protect the innocent. Lucky's development under Guardian's guidance has shown the world what becomes possible when wild wisdom combines with domestic care and unconditional love. The young paint horse embodies the best of both worlds. The intelligence and adaptability of his wild protector, combined with the training and socialization that will allow him to serve as an ambassador between the human and animal kingdoms. Their story has revolutionized wild horse management policies and inspired a new generation of animal sanctuaries that recognize the emotional complexity and family bonds that exist among Mustang herds. Guardian's sacrifice to save Lucky opened eyes to the reality that wild horses are capable of conscious choices, long-term planning, and depths of compassion that rival any human emotion. If this tale touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of hope, resilience, and the incredible bonds between humans and animals. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that love can bridge even the widest gaps. And let us know in the comments. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, sometimes the greatest miracles are waiting just beyond the horizon.